Hello, citizens of the world. We are anonymous. Dear brothers and sisters, now is the time to open your eyes. In a stunning move that has civil libertarians stuttering with disbelief, the U.S. Senate has just passed a bill that effectively ends the Bill of Rights in America. The National Defense Authorization Act is being called the most traitorous act ever witnessed in the Senate, and the language of the bill is cleverly designed to make you think it doesn't apply to Americans. But toward the end of the bill, it essentially says it can apply to Americans if we want it to. Bill summary and status. 112th Congress, 2011 to 2012, S. 1867. Latest title, National Defense Authorization Act 4. This bill, passed late last night in a 93-7 vote, declares the entire USA to be a battleground upon which U.S. military forces can operate with impunity, overriding posse comitatus and granting the military the unchecked power to arrest, detain, interrogate and even assassinate U.S. citizens with impunity. Even Wired magazine was outraged at this bill, reporting, Senate wants the military to lock you up without trial. The detention mandate to use indefinite military detention in terrorism cases isn't limited to foreigners. It's confusing, because two different sections of the bill seem to contradict each other. But in the judgment of the University of Texas Robert Chesney, a nonpartisan authority on military detention, U.S. citizens are included in the grant of detention authority. The passage of this law is nothing less than an outright declaration of war against the American people by the military-connected power elite. If this is signed into law, it will shred the remaining tenets of the Bill of Rights and unleash upon America a total military dictatorship, complete with secret arrests, secret prisons, unlawful interrogations, indefinite detainment without ever being charged with a crime, the torture of Americans and even the legitimate assassination of U.S. citizens right here on American soil. If you have not yet woken up to the reality of the police state we've been warning you about, I hope you realize we are fast running out of time. Once this becomes law, you have no rights whatsoever in America, no due process, no First Amendment speech rights, no right to remain silent, nothing. The U.S. Senate does not want us to speak. I suspect even now orders are being shouted into telephones and men with guns will soon be on their way. Why? Because while the truncheon may be used in lieu of conversation, words will always retain their power. Words offer the means to meaning and for those who will listen, the enunciation of truth. And the truth is, there is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there? Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression, and where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission. How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror. I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of problems which conspired to corrupt your reason and rob you of your common sense. Fear got the best of you, and in your panic, you turned to the now president in command, Barack Obama. He promised you order. He promised you peace. And all he demanded in return was your silent, obedient consent. More than 400 years ago, a great citizen wished to embed the 5th of November forever in our memory. His hope was to remind the world that fairness, justice, and freedom are more than words. They are perspectives. So if you've seen nothing, if the crimes of this government remain unknown to you, then I would suggest that you allow the 5th of November to pass unmarked. But if you see what I see, if you feel as I feel, and if you would seek as I see, then I ask you to stand beside one another, 1 year from November 5th, 2011, outside the gates of every courthouse of every city demanding our rights. Together we stand against the injustice of our own government. We are anonymous. We are legion. United as one. divided by 0. We do not forgive censorship. We do not forget oppression. U.S. Senate, expect us.
Good afternoon. My name is John Michael Turner. I currently reside in Burlington, Vermont. I served with Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines as an automatic machine gunner. There's a term, once a Marine, always a Marine, but there's also the term, eat the apple, F the core. I don't work for you no more.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And, you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
And I tried hard to be proud of my service, but all I could feel was shame. And racism could no longer mask the reality of the occupation. These were people. These were human beings. I've since been plagued by guilt anytime I see an elderly man, like the one who couldn't walk, who we rolled onto a stretcher and told the Iraqi police to take him away. I feel guilt anytime I see a mother with her children, like the one who cried hysterically and screamed that we are worse than Saddam as we forced her from her home. I feel guilt anytime I see a young girl, like the one I grabbed by the arm and dragged into the street. We were told we were fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It has long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Racism is a vital weapon employed by this government. It is a more important weapon than a rifle, a tank, a bomber, or a battleship. is more destructive than an artillery shell, or a bunker buster, or a Tomahawk missile. While all those weapons are created and owned by this government, they are harmless without people willing to use them. Those who send us to war do not have to pull a trigger or lob a mortar round. They do not have to fight the war, they merely have to sell the war. They need a public who is willing to send their soldiers into harm's way. They need soldiers who are willing to kill and be killed without question. They can spend millions on a single bomb, but that bomb only becomes a weapon when the ranks of the military are willing to follow orders to use it. They can send every last soldier anywhere on earth, but there will only be a war if soldiers are willing to fight. And the ruling class, the billionaires who profit from human suffering, care only about expanding their wealth, controlling the world economy. Understand that their power lies only in their ability to convince us that war, oppression, and exploitation is in our interest. They understand that their wealth is dependent on their ability to convince the working class to die to control the market of another country. And convincing us to kill and die is based on their ability to make us think that we are somehow superior. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen have nothing to gain from this occupation. The vast majority of people living in the U.S. have nothing to gain from this occupation. In fact, not only do we have nothing to gain, but we suffer more because of it. We lose limbs, endure trauma, and give our lives. Our families have to watch flag-draped coffins lowered into the earth. Millions in this country without health care, jobs, or access to education must watch this government squander over $450 million a day on this occupation. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war. I threw families onto the street in Iraq, only to come home and find families thrown onto the street in this country, in this tragic and unnecessary foreclosure crisis. We need to wake up and realize that our real enemies are not in some distant land. They're not people whose names we don't know and cultures we don't understand. The enemy is people we know very well and people we can identify. The enemy is a system that wages war when it's profitable. The enemy is the CEOs who lay us off from our jobs when it's profitable. It's the insurance companies who deny us health care when it's profitable. It's the banks who take away our homes when it's profitable. Our enemy is not 5,000 miles away. They are right here at home. If we organize and fight with our sisters and brothers, we can stop this war, we can stop this government, and we can create a better world.
Our combat mission is ending, but our commitment to Iraq's future is not. The Iraqi people now have lead responsibility for the security of their country.
After 7 years of fighting, U.S. combat troops have left Iraq.
We won! It's over! America! We brought democracy to Iraq!
But tonight, we tell the story of that war and occupation that the U.S. military doesn't want you to know. The one they wrote themselves. Dispatches has been sifting through nearly 400,000 secret army documents to uncover the full and unreported horror of the conflict. It's the biggest leak of official documents in history. Tonight, we reveal reports that US troops were killing more civilians than insurgents at checkpoints. That they killed people who were trying to surrender. That even after the scandal of Abu Ghraib, US soldiers continued to abuse prisoners. And also, how the Americans stand accused of turning a blind eye to the torture and murder of detainees by the Iraqi security services. This is the cemetery at Najaf in southern Iraq. has existed for 1,000 years and is the biggest in the world. Since the invasion by coalition forces to topple the dictator Saddam Hussein in 2003, it has expanded by 40%. It now covers over 3 square miles.
بالنسبة للعنف اللي صار بالعراق هذا طبعا أثر على جميع الشعب العراقي. أدوار تتجاوز 200 أدوار لا أقل. هاي كانت يعني الأعداد اللي متعارف عليها بذاك الوقت.
The United States and its coalition partners respect the people of Iraq. We are taking unprecedented measures to spare the lives of innocent Iraqi citizens.
There is often a difference between what political leaders say in public and what they may have known in private. As we discovered when we received access to data from WikiLeaks, the whistleblower's website. It contained nearly 400,000 secret reports known as SIGACTs. That's short for significant activities. With the exception of a couple of months, they were all logged by the military in Iraq between 2004 and 2009.
This is almost military anthropology. This is a blow-by-blow account of individual American soldiers and how they react.
But it was raw data, so the Bureau of Investigative Journalism in London built a computer program to analyse them. We used keywords to search specific subjects, looked for patterns in the data, decoded hundreds of military acronyms, and read tens of thousands of reports. We have no way of knowing just how accurate or comprehensive these reports are, but they do show what the US Army knew and when. The one person we asked to comment on them was Dr. Toby Dodge, who has advised both the UK and the US governments on Iraq. One concern was that the documents named ordinary American troops and Iraqi civilians. We have deleted those details.
Much more problematic for the Americans is the insight these leaks give into their modus operandi, how they're functioning on the streets. The escalation of force, the killing of innocent Iraqis, I think, it paints a damning picture of a culture of forced protection to the exclusion of everything else.
We got a shooter on the roof!
We will continue taking the greatest care to prevent harm to innocent civilians. Yet we will not permit the spread of chaos and violence.
Initially, the Americans stated that they weren't recording a body count or casualty figures and left it to others. But they were. In the files, we found just over 109,000 deaths. With our software, the location of every one can be mapped to reveal that after 6 years of killing, barely a part of the country has escaped the bloodbath. Despite George Bush's assurance, the majority of these, over 66,000, were civilians. That's nearly 2/3. Also recorded among the SIGACTs, 176,000 wounded in total. In Baghdad, Iraq's capital, the secret reports expose for the first time what kind of place the US and Britain are leaving behind. Because we can identify the location of each incident, we can also show that hardly a single street corner has escaped a bomb, murder, or atrocity.
Saddam Hussein's palace hit by a dozen bombs, Baghdad under the fiercest bombardment yet. American and British troops have seized...
The coalition hoped that the removal of Saddam Hussein would win them the hearts and minds of Iraqis. Instead, they found themselves under attack from insurgents. Our analysis of the secret reports shows that on average, over the 6 years they cover, improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, were being detonated at a rate of 30 a day. Many of which were carried by suicide bombers, and the reports contain some chilling examples.
A 12 to 14-year-old boy wearing a backpack and on a bicycle rode into the intersection, and the boy detonated his explosives.
Intelligence assessment. Al-Qaeda in Iraq is using mentally handicapped persons to target coalition forces.
Under these circumstances, troops manning checkpoints or riding convoy lived in constant fear. And some simply opened fire unnecessarily. One officer used civilians to lower the risk to his men.
The platoon leader was in the habit of directing Iraqi civilians to clear the road of trash and debris if he suspected that it may be an IED.
Under rules of engagement known as escalation of force, anyone approaching the military was warned to slow down and stop to be searched.
One to my right. Got it?
If they didn't, warning shot would be fed. Our analysis reveals more than 800 people were killed when soldiers opened fire in escalation of force incidents. Of these, 80%, that's 681, were civilians. A further 2,200 were wounded.
A cold, analytical eye on this, I think, clearly indicates that far too many Iraqi civilians are being killed for no reason.
One shooting was caught on camera by a photographer embedded with a US Army unit in Tal Afar, northwest Iraq. A married couple, Camille and Hussein Hassan, were driving home, hurrying to beat the curfew. The US secret report gives the American version of what happened next.
A sedan sped toward the patrol and failed to stop after visual signals were given. A shot was fired at the front tire, but the vehicle did not stop. The patrol engaged the vehicle, killing 2 civilians.
Camille and Hussein were shot dead, but they weren't alone in the car.
There were 6 children in the back seat. All were unharmed.
The Hassan's 14-year-old daughter, Jilan, was heard to yell out, "Why did they shoot us? We were just going home." And now we know the filed report was inaccurate. Not all the children were unharmed. A bullet pierced the spine of 11-year-old Rakan, who was rendered a paraplegic. The US Army offered compensation to the family of $7,500, calculated as $2,500 for each life taken, and $2,500 for the car.
Very often, soldiers find themselves looking at a vehicle that seems suspicious, and they get jumpy and then they open fire on it. And of course, there are cases where soldiers have lost comrades and they're angry, and they then are more inclined to look for the insurgents in the next vehicle coming or the next convoy that comes down the road.
When Iraqi civilians looked into the faces of our servicemen and women, they saw strength and kindness and goodwill.
Our analysis of the files shows that only 13 coalition troops were killed during those escalation of force incidents. But firing shots near ordinary people at checkpoints was often fatal. We found 30 children killed.
One round ricocheted off the concrete, hitting a 6-year-old.
Sometimes little allowance was made for the fact that there may be a reason for a driver to be in a hurry.
Doctor was transporting a pregnant woman to the hospital and was shot by coalition forces.
Soldiers killed a pedestrian who they suspected was carrying something suspicious, when what he had in his possession turned out to be innocuous.
The soldiers approached cautiously to look into the satchel to discover it contained books.
I think the data shows a lot of Iraqi civilians were killed because they posed a minor threat. They were that there was almost a cavalier use of force against Iraqi civilians in the name of force protection.
Just excessive physical force used by a lot of the soldiers and interrogation techniques that were, really off-putting and honestly not as horrible as I thought they would be. Like, there's not like, bed racks or anything that are hooked up to electricity, but torture is torture, and it takes its toll on you, and The idea of torture is, I think, that has gotten kind of crazy. Just being there is torture. You know, it's six years and 8 months that Jarallah spent down there. Mohsen was there for more than 3. He was there for 3 years. So, I mean, like that's a lot of time to be away from your family. Thinking about the psychological stress of being confined to a small cell, you know, and depending on ignorant MPs who have no cultural training to deal with the religion and the places you come from, you know, that alone is torture. Everything else is supererogatory. You know, everything else is on top of that. You know, the interrogations and the physical abuses. I highly doubted that any of them were guilty of anything. I knew that for sure there was a huge population of people there that weren't guilty of anything. After I left the Army, I made contact with a group called Iraq Veterans Against the War, and we went to Washington, D.C., and we, in a public platform, testified about our experiences in you know, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Guantanamo Bay, and the policy. This was called the Winter Soldier Testimonials, and Mohsen saw my testimony and contacted me via email and asked me, and over the course of the last year, we've been setting up this entire thing. Our message is pretty much that, you know, detentions policy by America needs to be checked. You know, like, we can't continue to detain people and without giving them trials. I'm just really impressed. These men have stayed strong through something I don't think I could ever make it through. They definitely had it way worse than I did, and you know, to see their energy and, you know, what they dedicate themselves to now is, you know, it's a really amazing thing. It's really humbling, and it's taught me a lot about what's important in life. If we just close down Guantanamo Bay without dealing with the issue of detentions and the holes in our detention policy and how all these people are slipping through the cracks and spending all these time in camps all around the world without charges either, you know, then we've failed. We've failed those people, and we failed the right that we, you know, we promised these countries that we were coming in with democracy, at least Iraq anyway. You know, we promised we were coming in with democracy, and democracy comes with law. So if we're not going to, you know, if we're going to be acting completely illegally and not be providing legal, you know, like a legal structure for these people, then we're just showing the whole world that we're liars.
Good afternoon. My name is John Michael Turner. I currently reside in Burlington, Vermont. I served with Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines as an automatic machine gunner. There's a term, once a Marine, always a Marine, but there's also the term, eat the apple, F the core. I don't work for you no more.
That was John Michael Turner stripping his medals and ribbons from his chest and throwing them into the audience to the applause of attendees at Winter Soldier. Turner then went on to describe some of his time in Iraq.
On April 18th, 2006, I had my first confirmed kill. This man was innocent. I don't know his name. I called him the Fat Man. He was walking back to his house, and I shot him in front of his friend and his father. The first round didn't kill him after I had hit him up here in his neck area. And afterwards, he started screaming and looked right into my eyes. So I looked at my friend who I was on post with, and I said, well, I can't let that happen. So I took another shot and took him out. He was then carried away by the rest of his family. It took 7 people to carry his body away. We were all congratulated after we had our first kills, and that happened to have been mine. My company commander personally congratulated me, as he did everyone else in our company. This is the same individual who had stated that whoever gets their first kill by stabbing them to death will get a 4-day pass when we return from Iraq. There's one incident where we got into a firefight just south of the government center, about 2,000 meters. We had no idea where the fire was coming from, and the way our rules of engagement were, pinpoint where the fire is coming from and throw a rocket at it. So with that being said, we still didn't know where the fire was coming from, and an 84mm rocket was shot into a house. I do not know if there was anyone in it. We do not know if that's where the fire was coming from, but that's what was done. Please go to the next image. This man right here was my third confirmed kill. As you can see, he was riding his bicycle. Later on in the day, we went ahead and we had CBS Laura Logan with us, but she was with the other squad. And so she wasn't with us. So myself and two other people went ahead and took out some individuals because we were excited about the firefight we had just gotten into, and we didn't have a cameraman or woman with us. With that being said, anytime we did have embedded reporters with us, our actions would change drastically. We never acted the same. We were always on key with everything, did everything by the books. The man on the bicycle, he was left in the street for about 10 minutes until we realized that we needed to leave where we were. And his body was dragged about 10 feet to the right of him, where his body was thrown behind a rock wall, and his bicycle was thrown on top of him. Another thing that we used to do a lot was recon by fire, where we would go ahead and try to start a firefight if we felt threatened in any way, shape, or form. There's one particular incident where we were working with the Iraqi Army and the Iraqi Special Forces in downtown Ramadi, and with our squad and the Iraqi Army, there was also lieutenant colonels, majors, first sergeants, and sergeant majors. Sorry, sergeants major. With that being said, the Iraqi Army would go into the house, kick in the doors, and then go ahead and shoot. And there were loud bursts of machine gun fire. We thought we were taking fire, but then we later found out that it was them. House raids. Because we were a grunt battalion, we were responsible for going on several patrols. A lot of the raids and patrols we did were at the night, around 3 o'clock in the morning, around there. And what we would do is just kick in the doors and terrorize the families. That was an image taken around 3 o'clock in the morning through night vision goggles. And that is the segregation of the women and children and the men. If the men of the household were giving us problems, we'd go ahead and take care of them any way we felt necessary, whether it be choking them or slamming their head against the walls. If you go back to that one picture, that was one man that wasn't taken, that was taken care of in a very bad way. Because of all the wiring that he had, it would be considered an IED making material. On my wrist, there's Arabic for FU. I got that put on my wrist just 2 weeks before we went to Iraq because that was my choking hand. And anytime I felt the need to take out aggression, I would go ahead and use it. Please go to the next picture. Next. There's an instance of detainees and how they were treated in a nice manner. Next. That is the Fatimat Mosque minaret. As you can see, it is ridden with bullet holes and holes in the top of it. Those were from mortars. And the next video that I'm going to show you is a tank round that went into that minaret, where we weren't sure if we were taking fire or not. I'll talk about this one. This is after one of the guys in weapons company had gotten shot. This is a way that we would take out our aggression. For those of you who don't know, it is illegal to shoot into a mosque unless you were taking fire from it. There was no fire that was taken from that mosque. It was shot into because we were angry. Can you please play the next video?
We are on
Next image. That, okay. With that being said, there's many more stories and incidents for me to talk about, although we don't have the time to. But this just goes to show you that that was the after effect of the tank round. This just goes to show you that everyone sitting up here has these stories. And there's been over 1 million troops that have gone in and out of Iraq. So the possibilities are endless. Next image, please. The reason I am doing this today is not only for myself and for the rest of society to hear, but it's for all those who can't be here to talk about the things that we went through, talk about the things that we did. Next image. Those 4 crosses and this memorial service were for the 5 guys in Kilo Company, 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines that we lost. Throughout our unit, we had 18 that got killed. With that being said, that is my testimony. I just want to say that I am sorry for the hate and destruction that I've inflicted on innocent people, and I'm sorry for the hate and destruction that others have inflicted on innocent people. At one point, it was okay. But reality has shown that it is not, and that this is happening, and that until people hear about what is going on with this war, it will continue to happen and people will continue to die. I am sorry for the things that I did. I am no longer the monster that I once was. Thank you.
Former Marine John Michael Turner fought with the 3rd Battalion, 8th Marines. The videos and photos the soldiers showed can be seen at our website, democracynow.org. This is
According to a former Iraqi police chief, U.S. Army behavior changed over time.
دجوا فيها بالتسلسل من 2004 وبعدها بدأوا يرمون بالأسلحة تحذيرية للأعلى. بعدها بدأوا يرمون على المواطنين.
We went to Iraq to find some of those who appeared in the escalation of force reports, to see how the Americans' account compared with theirs. Hassam and Karim Abbas are survivors of one such incident, which happened on this street in Baghdad. Karim's father, Wahid, was driving them to his restaurant where they all worked. They had only got 100 meters from their house when they found themselves surrounded by US military Humvees.
بالظلمة ماكو لا إشارة ولا هاي والشارع مفتوح. كنا ننزل نرفع ايدينا يعني نرفع ايدينا. هنا من رجعنا شوية السيارة طبقناها عدل. فتحنا الباب بس فتحت الباب ضربوا الباب على السريع. سدينا الباب قمنا نرجع على كيفنا وصلنا هنا ضرب الوالدي هنا. ضربها منا وطلع على السيارين. السيارة قامت ترجع من كيفه.
We cross-checked their account with the official report in the secret files. It acknowledges the death of a civilian, and it claims that escalation of force procedures were followed.
Signals with a laser and vehicle-mounted spotlight. Continues to shout and use visual signals to stop the car. Fires warning shots with smallest caliber weapon. Firing an M2 machine gun into the ground in front of the vehicle, and firing M4 into the engine block, disabling the vehicle.
We told Hassam and Karim what the army had said in the significant activity report.
لا ماكو لا سيطرة ولا هاي هي بالشارع مالنا كانوا مناصب لا سيطرة ولا هاي واقفين على الرصيف منا بالظلمة كهرباء طافية كانت بس من لفنا طبقت سيارتنا ويا سيارتهم.
After the soldiers killed Wahid, the young men allege that they were assaulted.
ماطلنا بقاع ويجيب رجله على راسنا ويفر كفرك بقاع والضرب هنا وهنا قتل على السمور وسحل يشيلوننا منا يشمرونا منا ويشمرونا منا.
The classified report gives a different version of events.
Respectfully transported the vehicle and the deceased to the family's house in order to allow them to begin funeral preparations and conducted consequence management. Coalition forces will be preparing a condolence packet.
In 2 other reports of escalation of force we examined, US troops claim that they followed procedures before opening fire. But in each case, when we cross-checked, the Iraqis involved told a different story.
What you can tell is the soldier's word appears to be always taken. There's very little questioning, and the death of innocent civilians seems to be written off.
I can already imagine that I'm going to get some comments on this video from people who are going to suggest that I'm un-American, or not patriotic, or I hate the troops, or any of these above ridiculous assertions. People like that aren't going to take into consideration that they, in fact, are the ones that are un-American. They, in fact, are the ones that are unpatriotic because they stand for everything that this country stood against. They stand against everything that this country was founded upon. In my saying that we need to struggle against tyranny, and anybody who wants to fight tyranny, anybody who says that murdering women and children is a war crime, because it's a war crime, these people are true Americans. This is an actual American. There's nothing more American than standing against tyranny. It's what this country was founded upon. How can you call us un-American? How can you stand by and allow your troops to be put through this and put through so many tours that they break them as people? How can you allow children to be murdered and women to be murdered? How can you allow troops to fire depleted uranium knowing that they're going to get cancer? How can you also then allow that depleted uranium to be left so that it destroys the land in Iraq and Afghanistan, so that you leave the hulls of tanks that you blew up with it and then the children are deformed? How could you rightfully do such atrocities and then claim that we're in the right? How could we be in the right? This is not a defensive war, people. We are in their homeland. We've been in their homeland. For 60 years we've been in the Muslim world, tearing it apart, pulling coup d'etats, putting in presidents and dictators alike that we'd like to work with, or whatever serves our purpose at that time. We created Al-Qaeda, and now we claim to be warring with them. We're working with Al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria, but they're our enemies. And then I get called crazy for 9/11. I'm not going to get into 9/11. You guys should be doing your own research on that, and it's so simple. Every single movie that I've ever made is about the same thing. It's about a different topic, but it all culminates with the same thing. There is a group of men, what I've been trying to explain, and they control this nation. They control Great Britain, and they have controlled this nation at least since 1913, when they established the central bank of the Federal Reserve. And I have covered this numerous times, and I've said this repeatedly, and it's so obvious, people. I'm not even going to get into it. It's ridiculous. We've lost far too many lives over a war that we're not even doing what we claimed to do. If we were really there to kill Osama bin Laden's supposedly dead, and he's probably been dead for some time. Nonetheless, Osama bin Laden's a CIA shit. He was a CIA asset by the name of Tim Osman. We all know this. This is not classified information. It's not like I was in the know or that I know a CIA agent. This is for everybody to see, thanks to the Freedom of Information Act. You can see the enhanced interrogation techniques. You can go on the internet and read the 50 different memorandums so that you can get a real broad outlook. I could make a movie where I could show every memorandum. It's constant their horrible things, like how they tortured Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's children right in front of them. That's the United States. That's what the good guys do, folks. We rape, murder, destroy the land, install frickin' dictators, install drug dealers as the president of Afghanistan, grow the opium, while we make it illegal in this country so that it's worth it. It's all a joke, a big joke. And it's very sad to watch this happen to this country that was once great, that was founded upon ideals, that should have stopped this, that has a constitution, that if we followed it, this never could have occurred. And if we just go back to the Constitution, we could stop these men in their tracks, right now, today, in 10 seconds. But nobody wants to do anything. And everybody just wants to call me crazy. And I'm going to laugh, because I'm sure I'm going to get a message in my inbox that says, "Where's my tin hat?" Or call me a conspiracy theorist, or blah, blah, blah. And what it is that you're scared, buddy. Straight up. It's that you're scared. And I'm sorry to have to be the one to point this out to you. But you know it's true, because it's so blatantly obvious, and you're just terrified. You're terrified of what might happen to you, or what might happen to your family. What you should be thinking about is what is going to happen to you, and what is going to happen to your family when this goes down. I don't care how scared you are. That's ridiculous. We have the power, damn it. We outnumber them millions to 1. We need our soldiers to come home, and we need them to stop being demoralized and destroyed morally. And frickin', we have to stop sending them through 50 tours and having them murder women and children, because it's destroying the fabric of their being. And they're going to come back here and possibly get orders to raid our houses for whatever. Because the National Defense Authorization Act makes it very clear that the terrorists are domestic. That's who they're looking for. They are looking for domestic terrorists. And we all know that there's not Al-Qaeda in this country. The CIA didn't put Al-Qaeda in this country because they don't need to put Al-Qaeda in this country. Because ultimately the enemy was always you and me. Even if you never said anything, you were always the enemy. You have thwarted these people's plans for at least 100 years because you were on. And they're pissed about it. They've tried to take your guns for at least 100 years. And they have unsuccessfully done it. And the gun purchase rates have gone up exponentially since Obama has been in office. And that's probably partly because of Obama and partly because people are waking up. And these men are scared. And they are rightfully so scared. They should be scared. You should not be scared. You should feel empowered. We have to stop these people. We have to stay peaceful, but we have to be active. We don't beat these men by attacking them. We beat them by standing up and saying no. And they can't do it. They can't do it with any amount of force because there's too much of us. And as long as we don't let them take our brother, our neighbor, they can't take us because our brother and our neighbor will have our back. We all have to stand up for one another. We have to speak out for what's right. That's what we're here for.
We're trying to salvage our Constitution and salvage our liberties. Obviously, too often our foreign policy of the last 30 or 40 years has backfired on us. We get involved, we spend a lot of money, lose a lot of lives, and there are no victories. And then the financial consequences are severe. There's been a $4 trillion increase in our national debt due to the wars we're fighting in the Middle East. Nobody gave proper authority to go there. Nobody knows exactly why we're there. Nobody knows when it's going to be over. They claim it's over in Iraq. I think it's only beginning. unfortunately, and it's just more turmoil. And the sooner we understand that not minding our own business is a much better way to get along with people than dropping bombs on them. But, you know, another important point in our platform is that of personal liberties. And I am convinced that if you understand personal liberty, if you understand individual liberty, if you understand where liberty comes from, it comes to us in a natural way. It comes to us in a God-given way. If you understand that, you know that you should also have the right to keep the fruits of all your labors. But it is this careless attitude about individual liberty that has really been undermining whether it's our foreign policy or our economic policy. We, as a country, 100 years ago or so, for some reason, we chopped freedom into pieces, and some people defended personal liberties a little bit better than others. Others defended economic liberty. But if you understand individual liberty, personal liberty and economic liberty are one in the same. When people are frightened, sometimes they overdo things. And I think a lot of that happened after 9/11. By not understanding the full impact and what was going on after 9/11, tragically it was used as an opportunity for those who had a bill floating around for a decade, and they saw this as an opportunity. And it was a bill that was misnamed, obviously. It was called the Patriot Act. It should have never been passed, and it ought to be repealed. It was obviously well-intended, but taking away our freedoms is not a good result of what they were trying to do. Franklin warned us about giving up liberty for security. And I have come to the firm conviction that we as Americans should never give up any liberty on the pretense that we're going to have more security. I'm convinced if the Patriot Act had been named something like repeal the Fourth Amendment, it might have had more trouble getting passed. But I was sitting beside another congressman when we were passing that bill, and we only had an hour or two to look at that final version, and he was voting for it, and guess what? I was voting against it. And I said to him, why are you voting for this? I said, have you read it? No. I said, there's a lot of bad stuff in here. He says, I know. I said, well, why are you voting for it? He says, well, how can I go back to my district? After 9/11, the people want us to do something. I can't go back and explain it to them. I said, but that is your job, to go back home and explain it to them. But the Patriot Act is going, if it's not changed or repealed, it's going to be a real burden to us because it's a real attack on our privacy. And now they're planning more. They're planning the whole idea of controlling the Internet. They're saying they're going to control piracy on the Internet. But what they're going to do is control your freedom and your privacy. We have the government turned upside down. The government becomes more secretive. At the same time, your privacy is being undermined. The Constitution was meant to protect your liberties, your privacy, and the government was to be open. Approximately a year ago, a member of the Obama administration came to a Senate committee and announced that policies had been changed. He said now that they are changing this, and it's up front. They were putting it out on the table. That's what really scares me. They've abused the law in the past, but they knew it was wrong, and they hid it. Today, it's too much up front. He said, we are now have an established policy that we can assassinate American citizens. That is bad news. So they practiced it. They did it on 3 times, and they've established this as a precedent. So that is a dictatorship when 1 or 2 people in the whole United States can dictate and decide he's a bad guy, he needs assassinated because we can't try him. No charges, nothing official. So it is especially important that you try the bad guys, because if you don't try the bad guys, it really undermines our liberties. We have done this. Just think after World War II, the Nazi criminals were tried at Nuremberg. Even Adolf Eichmann, finally, when he was captured, he was tried, given a trial, and then properly executed by the Israelis. So why are we getting so afraid of capturing people and arresting them and giving them a proper rights? But no, they've gone one step further. Here, 2 weeks ago, they passed this very, very ornery National Defense Authorization Act. And I'm always very pleased, and I comment on it, because the people who come to our rallies and know about what we stand for knows what's in that bill, and unfortunately the rest of the country better find out what is in that bill. But that bill essentially says that any American citizen now can be arrested, not by their local police, not by the FBI, not by some other group, but by the military. This is military law. The military can come in and arrest an American citizen and put in prison indefinitely and denied a lawyer. That has to be reversed, or we cannot have a republic anymore. So that should be our goal. But really all we have to do is think about liberty, where it comes from, defend liberty. You will defend the marketplace, you will defend private property, you will defend sound money, you will defend contracts, and you will have the regulations of free markets. Under those conditions, guess what? The rich don't get bailed out, and the people don't get their bad debts dumped on them. You have to live up to the contract and the bankruptcy. So this is the important thing. We have to see the free market, individual liberty, a sound economic, a sound foreign policy. And we have a tremendous opportunity. We are having a tremendous impact. Iowa was a great victory as far as I'm concerned, and I believe that the momentum will continue. I believe this country is ripe. They're frustrated with the leadership of both parties. They never see anything change, but they know darn well that I will stick to my guns if put in that office and protect the Constitution and liberty. Thank you. Thank you.
The video you're about to see is standard operating procedure and happens thousands of times per week in the United States. This was Columbia, Missouri. SWAT team goes in. The people open the front door. They go in. They have a Welsh Corgi and a bulldog. The dogs are barking at them, and they shoot them both and kill them. Then you see the little children. You see the father crying when he finds out his dogs are dead. And you look at the looks on the police officer's face when he's crying, and they've got this look of power-tripping enjoyment, and they won't ever respond to him. They won't ever talk to him when he asks questions. So he doesn't respond to them after that when they ask him questions. And they reported that they found 1 gram of marijuana in his marijuana pipe. Ladies and gentlemen, let me explain something here. The drug war was initiated after Prohibition in the 1930s. The trafficking interests controlled by Yale University, Skull and Bones, and others, this is all on record, traveled around the country and got the states and the federal government to pass laws against opium, heroin, cocaine, things like that were sold at convenience stores. It was sold at every major little pharmacy. And in the old days, convenience stores were mainly pharmacies. They had newspapers and drugs and things. Less people were using marijuana, cocaine, heroin when they were legal. Once they made them illegal, the price went way up. And the reason I raise this issue is no one is safe. The police can bust in your door because some drug addict informant says that they saw marijuana there. And I thought about my French bulldog. What happens with my 35-pound dog and my Chihuahua if a SWAT team ever comes to my house? And I don't even smoke marijuana. I do drink some. And my dogs will bark, they will run out, they will jump out of the bed, they sleep with us, and the police will kill them. Years ago, on my local TV show, we did episode after episode of locals who were SWAT teamed where drugs weren't even found, and they would come in and kill a lab that was even chained up in the kitchen. And we went and showed photos of it with its brains blown out and its intestines everywhere, and the cops were laughing in that case, and they fired bullets through the wall that went into the baby crib in one case. And the issue is these police officers have lost their souls. They're getting off on this. Does that mean all police are getting off on it? No. But the issue is the phony drug war gives the Pentagon that's involved in it and the militarized police an excuse to be involved in our daily lives, to knock down our doors, to give them some type of fake jurisdiction. So we're going to play you clips from this video of what they've done, and we'll post the full video shot by the police up in the corner if you want to watch it.
You're fine. Just make sure we're stay around. Don't move. You understand? Put your hands behind your back. Do it now. Behind your back. What is happening? Search warrant. Narcotic search warrant. Don't move. Search. Turn around right here. Don't move. Did you just shoot? Did you shoot my dog? Stand still. You shot my f***ing dog. Oh my God. My dog is nice. She was probably trying to play with you. Come over here. She was probably trying to play with you. Once we get down, let's get him in the car. C-Pop? Yeah.
Yeah, that you read silent. Anything you say can. You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with you while you're being questioned. Do you understand?
We'll take that as a yes. You are on audio tape, as a matter of fact. That's fine. Okay, come on. I didn't do anything wrong.
But this is why I'm doing this video. This is why I'm so outraged. This is the key. It has come out in the last 8 years that the Taliban had cut off almost all opium production in Afghanistan, previously the main site of opium that then produces heroin. And that the U.S. government went in and started helping the Afghans grow the opium again. And, of course, the CIA got caught in Vietnam on record shipping opium out. They were caught in 1996. Even the CIA Inspector General admitted that most of the cocaine for the crack cocaine epidemic was shipped in. And now in Afghanistan, because Pat Tillman wrote letters home before they killed him saying, look, we're growing the opium, this is wrong, I'm against this war, it's a fraud. Now because all that info's come out and the troops are there being forced to help grow the opium, they've come out in the New York Times and said, yeah, Mohammed Karzai's brother, the president of Afghanistan, is the biggest drug dealer. Yeah, we're letting him grow the opium. Yeah, we're helping him. We've got to do this or Al-Qaeda will get the money. No, you decriminalize it, and then Al-Qaeda, the CIA, they won't have the profit because it's illegal anymore, and it won't have the huge profits involved in it with the black market. But here's the deal. The government ships most of the cocaine in. The only people they bust are those that aren't paying their cut. Okay? The government ships in almost all the heroin. It's more than up 12 times what it was 8.5 years ago when we invaded Afghanistan. Record numbers. Over 90% of global opium is coming out of Afghanistan, and they have Geraldo Rivera there with the Marine Corps commander going, I don't like it, but we've got to help them grow it, and you know, we're here letting them do it.
The hard part now is governing this province, a province, as you suggest, that has become addicted to opium in many, many ways. That is the principal crop that is being grown here. The Taliban lend the farmers the money. They are indebted to the Taliban. They have to grow the opium. Now the Marines, in their success, are in a sense a victim of their success, because now the population is, you know, they have these opium fields, and we are tolerating it. We are tolerating the cultivation of the opium because we know that if we were to destroy it now, the population would turn against the Marines, and it would be a real security risk. You're watching as this opium is being grown. I know it grinds at your gut. How do you deal with it? What are you doing about it?
Well, frankly, this is a part of their culture. So while it might grind in my gut, it's what they do.
I fault the politicians for putting the Marines in this position, where we can't eradicate these crops for security reasons. And
that's the point. They ship it in to have an excuse to bust down your door and build giant prisons. We have the biggest prison population in the world, and no one is safe. I've seen countless reports of, retired CPAs and people when the SWAT team raids the wrong house and kills them, or old ladies, 90-something years old, and they shoot them and kill them. And then you see the cops laughing about it, you see them enjoying it, you see them on this big power trip. And you also have the police raiding real drug dealers and keeping the money, keeping the drugs, seizing their assets, taking cash out of people's wallets on the highway, letting illegal aliens go that have been caught with $105,000 of drugs just last week in Tennessee. The government runs the narcotics business. And they then put you in their private prisons, making license plates and making furniture to then compete with everybody else that's on the outside. So the prisoners are making 25 cents an hour. That drives down wages just like the illegal aliens do. Mexico is collapsing because of the phony drug war. The United States is going to collapse. And this is pure Nazi Germany, to have men come in your house and kill your dogs because they bark at them every single day in this country, and then just sit there smugly enjoying the power trip from what they've done. Think about it. The troops are over in Afghanistan growing the opium. They're going to come back. Most of them are going to end up being SWAT team people and cops, and then they're going to raid your house for a gram of marijuana. You think about that. 80+% of the American people smoke marijuana or have smoked it. Most cops have smoked it, but they don't care. They're going to come in your house, kill your dogs in front of your little kids. They're going to drag you off to jail for a gram of marijuana. That's less than a joint. This is completely disgusting and sickening. So you've seen the video of the kids, the dogs bleeding to death in pain. You've seen the cops with their smug looks of enjoyment whenever the father is crying. And you've seen the newscast where Fox News is explaining to you, we've got to help grow the opium. We've got to let them do this to fight Al-Qaeda. It is a sickening fraud. And look, they were denying this years ago. But now, because it's so out in the open and the troops are writing home and speaking out about why are we growing the opium, they're just hiding it in plain view. We help grow the opium, we let them ship it out, and then if we catch you with it, we're going to kill your dogs and come in your house. And if we catch you with marijuana, we're going to do it, because we're fighting drugs, because drugs are bad. It's all these fake moral people in America who are supporting the drug war like a bunch of ignoramuses who are allowing this giant police state to grow up around them that is going to enslave them and their families. Understand. The troops throwing puppies off cliffs, the troops shooting children, the troops torturing people, they're having their minds warped. And they're coming back to become cops who have that hunger to see that pain and to have that domination and to have that control, going after drugs that were shipped in by the government. But why do they hate marijuana so much? The government doesn't control marijuana. It can be grown anywhere. And that's why they're doing it. That's why they're coming against the American people. This isn't America. This isn't freedom. It is a fraud. Remember that. The government openly ships the drugs in now. They hide it in plain view and admit they're doing it, and they think you're too stupid to put two and two together. In the New York Times and AP and everywhere, the Russians said, let us go in and spray the opium. We're losing 30,000 Russians a year from heroin overdoses. And NATO said, no. We're not going to allow eradication. U.S. troops are now basically farmers. They're helping grow the opium, protecting it, and then it's shipped out of the country. And it's come out that a lot of the big defense contractors and private mercenary groups are busy flying the drugs out. And they're also using rendition CIA aircraft for kidnapped people in the U.S. and worldwide they grab to also fly the drugs in and out. That's like a few years ago, Reuters reported that a CIA aircraft filled with pure cocaine coming from the source crashed in Mexico. And now that's not enough. This big police state's hungry for the American people. They're trying to pass laws where no judge, no jury, no charges. They just put you on a no-fly list. You can't buy guns. Now they've got bills introduced where Lieberman's out there promoting and has a good chance of passing that if they say they think you might be a terrorist, your constitutional rights are stripped, your citizenship is stripped, and you're given to a secret military team and can be tortured. This is an illegitimate criminal narcotics trafficking government. Stop shipping the drugs in, government, and stop using it as a pretext to pack your private prisons and raid people's houses while the cops get stinking rich off all the drug money and drugs they steal. Our government is a drug-dealing criminal operation. We have to take it back. We have to decriminalize drugs right now to cut off the drug money to the scumbag banks that launder it.
told me I would never make it, I would never achieve it. Reality is nourishment, but people don't believe it. I guess it's hard to stomach the truth like a bulimic. It's a dirty game and nobody is willing to clean it. But this is for the paraplegic people dreaming and running. Ladies married to men who don't please them, dreaming of coming. Verbally murderous like David Berkowitz when I'm gunning. Some cowards on the internet didn't think I would sell. Scared to talk shit in person cause they stuck in a shell and couldn't understand the pain of being stuck in a cell. Hell is not a place you go if you're not a Christian. It's the failure of your life's greatest ambition. It's a bad decision to blindly follow any religion. I don't see the difference in between the wrong and the wrong. Soldiers emptying the clips at little kids and their moms are just like a desperate motherfucker strapped to a bomb. Humanity's gone, smoked up in a gravity bong by a Democrat, Republican, Cheech and Chong. Immortal technique, you never heard me preaching a song. I'm not controversial, I'm just speaking the facts. Put your hands in the air like you got the heat to your back and shake your body like a baby born addicted to crack. And since life's a gamble like the craps tables at Vegas, I freestyle my destiny. It's not written in pages. I hate it when they tell us how far we came to be, as if our people's history started with slavery. Painfully I discovered the shit they kept a secret. This is the exodus, like the black Jews out of Egypt. I keep it reality based with the music I make. Blow up the truth in your face with the style I run with, like the Navy missile that shot down Flight 800. I'm like the Africans who came here before Columbus, and from the 1500s until after tomorrow I watch Latin America get raped in the sorrow. You see, the Spaniards never left después de Colón. And if you don't believe me, you can click on Univision. I never seen so much racism in all of my life. Every program and newscast, all of them white. It's like apartheid with 10% ruling the rest. That type of stress'll make me put the fucking tool in your chest. Step in my way, nigga, I wouldn't wanna be ya. I burn slow like pissing drunk with gonorrhea. I'll do a free show in North Korea, burning the flag, while J. Edgar Hoover politicians dress up in drag, trying to confuse you, making it hard to follow this. Capitalism and democracy are not synonymous. You swallow propaganda like a birth control pill, selling your soul to the eye on the back of the dollar bill. But that'll never be me, cause I'm leaving the past like an abused wife with the kids, leaving your ass like a drug addict, clean and sober, leaving the stash. Unbreakable technique, leaving a plane crash. I'm out with the black box and I refuse to return. I spit reality instead of what you usually learn, and I refuse to be concerned with condescending advice, cause I'm the only motherfucker that could change my life. Some people think I won't make it, but I know that I will. Escape the emptiness, cause that shit is slow and it kills. The flow and the skill, I made y'all believe it at last. You can make the future, but it starts with leaving the past.
My name's Grant Collins. I'm a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War. I was a corporal in the 1st Battalion, 23rd Marines. Was in Iraq from August of '04 to May of '05. A few months after I was there, I mean, a lot of things weren't sitting right with me. The command structure, the missions that we were getting didn't make any sense. We're going after people, mujahideen or muj, and they didn't have any idea which ones were the right ones. We're kicking in the wrong doors, terrifying children, helicopters screaming over their heads at night, and I'm trying to calm the women and children while the men were dragged and separated out and completely humiliated in front of their families. In that culture, it's a very big deal to be treated with respect in front of your family, just as it is in ours. But in this, I mean, it can mean a lot of shame. When I really, really, really came to the point where I knew that what we were doing was absolutely morally wrong, was when, well, a few days, everybody knows, a few days after Bush was reelected, we are allegedly reelected. We began. We had already cordoned off Fallujah, and Cloy was in the first incursion in April, where we took heavy casualties, and then decided that maybe it wasn't the right time to go in. Maybe there's too many of them in there. So I was a part of the cordon where we cordoned it off, and then we made operations to move in. And 2 o'clock in the morning, we went across the berm and instantly started taking casualties, but started lighting up this city like you wouldn't believe. Artillery strikes going in, and planes flying in and dropping 500-pound J-down bombs into obviously civilian areas. I mean, my platoon was tasked with moving down a certain sector from the north side of the city, and of course we had to take every building block that we went through, and we had already come up to like a four-story like apartment building, and we had encountered heavy resistance from there, and there was no way that we were going to be able to clear it with using people, so we called an airstrike on it, well, a helicopter strike with it, and after a couple of them, the building just completely collapsed in. And I was thinking at the time, man, how many civilians could have been inside there? I mean, just like any kind of conflict, there's people that are hiding inside of places that are unable to come out of these buildings out of fear that they're going to be killed by the enemy or our enemy for leaving, or out of fear that they're going to get shot in the streets, because when they do, they come out and they do get shot in the streets trying to get away. We moved down another block and we came up to a smaller building, and my squad was tasked with taking this building, and the doorway, there was fire coming out of the doorway, machine gun fire, and from the windows. So I had an attachment of SMAs, which are rockets, a two-man team of rockets, and you can use these rockets to blow holes, make another doorway, if you will, in the side of a building. So I gave the order for them to use the missiles on the building. So we hit it, and then we stormed into the building, and there was two 14, well, looked about a 14-year-old kid, a 6-year-old kid, and a young, maybe this could have been her husband, I couldn't tell because he was so messed up, and a woman that was bleeding, but not severely, and all she was screaming, "Why, Laish, Laish," and I broke down. I leaned up against the wall, and as my rest of my Marines cleared through the building, and I sat there with the corpsman trying to do something about it. But I started to cry. I wanted to rip my hair out, what hair I did have, and go nuts. And the woman, seeing my reaction, came up to me and put her hand on my cheek and said, "Inshallah," which is God's will. Because these people over there, it doesn't matter what bad things happen to them, that they can accept it right away as God's will because they're deeply religious. But no, it wasn't God's will. It was my fucking order. I gave the order to fire those rockets into that building, and I killed her family. And that's when I knew that I was put in a situation where I had to do that. I thought I had to do that to keep myself and my Marines alive, thinking that, well, man, that was the best thing I could do at the time. Well, I have to live with that decision. From then on, well, of course we had the rest of that battle to go through, and I saw more casualties, more civilians being killed. Well, I don't know. I've been here a couple times. I've had to go back. I went back to Grand Rapids, Michigan, to start school. But when Lauren told me that she wanted to come back, I had to come back. On the 26th of August, I lost another friend. He was on his third tour, and the thing is that it's making me really upset is now I'm starting to, their names are all blending together now. And she asked what his name was, and I gave her a name, a wrong first name and a wrong last name. And and then I had a dream after all this, and I saw him in my dream, and he, in his typical joking attitude, said that I was fresh out of friends. That I needed to make some new ones. He's joking around like he used to always say stupid shit like that. And anyway, it's my duty now. It is my duty to stand up and speak, and I will do this until this war is over. That's all I have.
Iraqi civilians were even more vulnerable to American attack from the air, something the coalition didn't like admitting. We looked at the reports of one aerial operation called Steel Curtain, an attack on insurgents crossing into Iraq, and found they did record collateral damage. In 2006, American television interviewed Lieutenant Colonel John Harris of the U.S. Air Force, who was involved in the operation.
Do you think that civilians were killed in any of those incidents?
I don't know of any friendly fire. I can't say that they were or they weren't. We do our absolute best to make sure that collateral damage is minimized in every case.
Colonel Harris didn't appear to be aware of what was contained in the significant activity reports on Steel Curtain. The deaths of 30 civilians, including a dozen children.
Steel Curtain reported finding civilian bodies buried in 3 separate locations.
The US military caused so many casualties that they undoubtedly pushed more and more of the Iraqis they had hoped to win over into insurgency. By 2007, 4 years after the invasion, the country had descended into anarchy.
2 bodies down! Trying to get to it!
The situation in Iraq is unacceptable to the American people, and it is unacceptable to me. Our troops in Iraq have fought bravely. They have done everything we have asked them to do. Where mistakes have been made, the responsibility rests with me.
The President dispatched a new commander, General David Petraeus, who announced a change in tactics on the ground to protect civilians and better target the insurgents. It was called the Surge. It involved the increasing use of air power.
The usefulness of air power in counterinsurgency is as a monitor. You use it to see what's going on, to listen, to collect intelligence. But using it either for bombing or for attacking or strafing a building on the ground or somewhere where you think insurgents are hiding is very dangerous indeed.
Come on, fire!
This video, filmed from the cockpit of an Apache helicopter, put on the internet by WikiLeaks, proves the point. 2 Reuters journalists were killed, and 2 children were wounded after the helicopter opened fire.
Hey, I need to get the brass to drop ramps. I got a wounded girl. We need to take the rough to mile.
The helicopter video also shows a Hellfire missile being fired into a building after the pilot claimed 6 insurgents were hiding in it.
Crazy Horse 1-8 could put up missile in that building.
But in the military record of this incident, there's no mention of the pedestrian walking past when the missile was fired.
You lost a missile.
We've discovered from the raw data that 80% of Hellfire missiles, that's over 1,300, were fired after the start of Petraeus' surge. We travelled to a remote rural location, 3 hours from Baghdad, to find the survivors of one of the most shocking attacks.
احنا من حاجة رجعنا مش ورا كان الطق قدامنا ورا ما طقت قمنا ما نشوف كل شيء دخان مشينا ورحنا ورا عادي لقينا بس اللحم من الثار عاد قمنا نصيح مشينا ولما جاوا.
According to the secret record, US forces who were conducting surveillance thought an improvised explosive device, or IED, was being planted.
5 IED emplacers who were trying to blend in with the sheep herd.
سمعنا صوت انفجار كلش قوي تقريبا صار ب2:30. جينا لمكان الحادث مسرعين تلقونا الاطفال يتصارخون علاوي يتمزق علاوي يتمزق لمينا اجزاء الراس جبناه من مسافه تقريبا اكثر من 100 متر لمتنا ولفينا ودينا الى.
The significant activity report shows that 2 Apache attack helicopters using the call sign Carnage 27 let off 50 rounds from their machine guns and launched a Hellfire missile at the emplacers.
They were an anti-armour helicopter designed for the Cold War to confront columns of Warsaw-type tanks. And Hellfire missile is a battlefield missile. It's pretty powerful, and it is designed to be used against armoured vehicles or concentrations of troops.
The crew had made a horrifying mistake. They hadn't blown up insurgents.
There were 6 children digging for roots to use as firewood. After the 13-year-old boy was killed, the other children ran out of fear.
من ورا الأمريكان صار جابونا الحرية وين الحرية جابونا وبس الذبح والقتل.
Our analysis of the reports shows that the military acknowledged only 103 civilians killed as a result of airstrikes in 6 years.
The figure 103 is ludicrously too low. Air power is a very blunt weapon. By using air power regularly and in fact increasing the use of air power as the occupation goes on, you're undoubtedly killing a great deal more civilians than the US's own internal assessment suggests.
And buried away in the files on airstrikes we discovered was another reference to the call sign Crazy Horse 18.
Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18. Oh yeah, look at those dead bastards.
It's one of the most grotesque incidents we found, and involved their treatment of insurgents who wanted to surrender.
Crazy Horse 18 reports anti-Iraqi forces got into a dump truck headed north, engaged, and then they came out wanting to surrender.
The helicopter crew radioed base, seeking advice.
Crazy Horse 18 cleared to engage dump truck. Lawyer states they cannot surrender to aircraft and are still valid targets.
Moments later, the 2 men were killed with a Hellfire missile. Yet we discovered 4 reports where insurgents were allowed to surrender to a helicopter. But this video, leaked by Live Leaks, shows that others were gunned down with their hands in the air. The number of deaths caused by the Americans in Iraq, now revealed in the secret files, is shocking. But we have also discovered reports that US forces were abusing prisoners long after the scandal of Abu Ghraib. And for the first time, the records reveal what the Americans knew about the barbaric practices of the Iraqi security services.
So if you think if we walked away from this, didn't give them money today, it would be worse for us from a security standpoint.
I do. We're building a relationship that just did not exist. I said in our last trip when you were with me that we had a huge trust deficit, in part because the United States had, to be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting.
How?
Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan. And we were successful. The Soviets left Afghanistan, and then we said, great, goodbye, leaving these trained people who were fanatical in Afghanistan and Pakistan, leaving them well armed, creating a mess, frankly, that at the time we didn't really recognize. We were just so happy to see the Soviet Union fall, and we thought, okay, fine, we're okay now. Everything's going to be so much better. Now you look back, the people we're fighting today, we were supporting in the fight against the Soviets.
Capitalism's a religion that makes Satan a god.
To countless fans, Immortal Technique is a revolutionary rapper. Those hearing him for the first time will notice it's not your conventional packaged and branded hip-hop.
Who really made Bin Laden the man that he is? The CIA.
Tech is as much an artist as he is a political activist. Lyrically tackling issues like war, poverty, and racism, this New Yorker makes no apologies for his words or perspectives.
Most, if not all, of your lyrics focus on political issues and socioeconomic inequalities that are taking place domestically and internationally. At this point in time, with all the problems mounting up all over the world, what are you focusing on?
Most recently, one of the larger things that I was focused on was the situation in Afghanistan. And actually, we had this conversation off camera, so we'll just get into it right now. The litmus test that is provided for our justification of invasion of another country. I think that while a lot of people would question our entrance into Iraq, and they said we should have never gone to Iraq, we should have never gone to this country, there's some people that say we showed up to Bosnia too late, we should have gone there earlier. And the question is, well, what is the litmus test? When should we invade? Some people say, oh, well, what about Rwanda? Shouldn't we have gone there? So at some point we have to confront the circumstances that are behind when the United States of America finally releases its military force to aid or to topple the regime. And I don't think that that's clearly defined. I think that there are talking points people come up with to say, all right, this person's a bad person, this person's a dictator, they treat their people terribly. That's fine, but we also are at peace and we support plenty of dictators who treat their people horribly. And we have done that systematically over the years. We used our Cold War with Russia in the past to justify behavior like this, claiming that if we didn't, all of a sudden it would fall to the communists and the economy would turn into a wash for us, that we wouldn't have access to any natural resources, everything would be nationalized. And now I don't think that we can really use that excuse anymore, so we come up with other ones. Oh, they're going to be taken over, they'll become a safe haven for terrorism or whatever it may be. But I think that as time progresses with any occupation, it begins to be revealed what the real reasons for us invading a country are, and they're to benefit us and to benefit our corporations rather than the safety of the civilians either there or here.
Well, the reason that was given to the American people and the world at large for the U.S. Invading Afghanistan was 9/11. Was that following the September 11th attacks, the American administration said that Osama bin Laden was responsible for the attacks on America.
I would believe and I would completely concur if we had actually finished the job there when we had had the chance, instead of pulling out and then coming up with 7 different reasons for invading Iraq. First one didn't work out because they didn't have a nuclear weapon, which I remind people that was the catchphrase. They might be able to develop a nuclear capability, and nuclear, or as George Bush said, a nuclear, whatever it may be, but that was continuously drilled into the heads of the American public. Then when nuclear was ruled out, chemical weapons. Oh, well, he might have chemical weapons. Well, if he has any left over from the ones that we helped him stockpile, then that would be a concern for the surrounding area. But then all of a sudden it became, okay, there's no large, huge stockpiles of chemical, biological weapons, so now we're trying to help the people. Now this is a democratization effort. So I think that when we look back, we can find justifications for certain things, and I think that if we wanted to address the Taliban and how wicked they were to their people, why weren't we doing that in 2001 when we were giving them millions and millions of dollars to supposedly destroy their poppy crops, or inviting them here as foreign diplomats without the full criticism of the administration at the time?
I read that you said that 9/11 was a crime with a motive. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that when we talk about 9/11, I myself don't like to give into conspiracy. So I just say that while I can't come here and say to people, oh, I know exactly what happened, that I know that the government's version is definitely not true, because they couldn't even tell the truth about the air to breathe after that occurred. They said that it was safe, that it was fine, and then when people developed these respiratory illnesses, and a lot of the first responders got very, very sick, some of them died, they went into full deniability mode. So someone that can't even tell me the truth about whether I can breathe this air or not, it really makes me question what else they said. You know, when I talk about it having a motive, I think that it was used as a catalyst to justify several other actions, or countless numbers of actions, I should say.
Such as war?
Not just war, but consolidation of power within America. The war on the outside, I think, is more of a distraction, unfortunately, for the American people to kind of look and point at and even rally in the streets about. But even if you go to a rally, and this is not a criticism of activism by any means, only a helpful hand to educate more people and make them understand that, look, even if we do 100,000, 500,000 people in front of Washington protesting a war, at the end of the day, what did we do? We spent a lot of gas money getting there. We helped the local economy by buying all that food that we did when we went there. And what did we really achieve? Moving people from one place to another. We're not really speaking their language. Their language is money, you know? And what they do over and over is take a action that occurs outside of this country, and while the public is completely focused on that, begin to reorganize what's happening here in America with the Patriot Act, with going after people who have some sort of criticism of America, with discrediting individuals who would even question the smallest concern that they have in terms of what the government's doing behind closed doors.
I read following Obama's victory, his election a year ago, that you said it was necessary for America to not follow the footsteps of the Roman Empire. It's been 1 year since he's been elected. Do you feel that his leadership has changed America's trajectory in any way?
I don't know Mr. Obama personally, so I can't make personal attacks about who he is and his character as a man. I've never sat down and had a conversation with him. But if I examine his foreign policy, and I see that really the mission hasn't changed that much, that we've diverted troops from Iraq and then put them back into Afghanistan, that our troop strength there is almost equal to the amount of troops that the Russians had during the height of their occupation, that in fact when I went to Afghanistan, people were more resentful towards Americans than they were towards the legacy of Russia, even though that occupation was a lot more violent. And I think that's where I would kind of begin to really get into what I think about Obama, that if you look at it, what has really changed? You know, that fact that he got a Nobel Peace Prize, I don't think is indicative of change. I think that's the left of Europe putting pressure on him and saying, hey, you know what? You know, your generals that are obviously bought by the right wing can put pressure on you in this way and release reports that say you must send more troops to Afghanistan, otherwise we're going to fail. And what kind of position does that put Obama in? It puts him in a position that he looks weak to the right and weak to the left by not sending more troops in, when he's taking advice from the same people that were supposed to give George Bush advice that he didn't listen to about Iraq. So what's their response? We're going to give you a Nobel Peace Prize. Now how the do you look sending 30,000 more troops and God knows how many mercenaries into that country?
How did you end up fusing this passion that you have and this deep knowledge with your music. How did that come together?
Because I feel like our people would benefit from understanding that a little bit more about themselves. Because I wanted to know the origin of things. I wanted to know how we became a Christian nation. I even wanted to know how the people of Russia initially became a Christian nation. And then I discovered, okay, well, the Byzantine Emperor Basil II, he was at war with the Bulgars, and he went to Vladimir I, and he said, hey, I'll give you my daughter Anna if you Christianize your people. And Vladimir, being the intelligent Vladimir of Kiev that he was, said, hey, you know what? I've researched all of these other religions. None of them consolidates power the way this one does. And because we both share an area near the same sea, and we can both use each other, I'll even send you 6,000 of my Varangians, and we'll call it a day. Deal done. But it explains a lot of how religion and how politics work in conjunction with one another. It explains how peoples are unified by the same cause, and how sometimes, whether we choose to realize it or not, we have more things in common than we do apart. We all want the same things, and yet there are people who are in charge of our government who aren't satisfied with us wanting the same things. And by the same things, I don't mean the same shirt to wear. I don't mean the American exaggeration of what socialism or communism is. I don't believe that we should give in to one standard or another. I think it should be measured based upon what a population decides, and not have some controlling interest from a foreign country or a foreign corporation, because all corporations are foreign, really. They deal with a small, tiny island nation of people who decide things for others. I grew this passion because of that desire to make a connection between one and the other. And the more it became clearer and clearer how one affected the other, the more I decided to dig deeper and deeper into it. And I love when I'm proved wrong, and I love putting my ideas out there and having them debated, because I feel like it gives me a chance to grow personally as well.
You have been offered to sign with labels a few times, a couple of times, and thus far you have not signed with any big labels that many would consider a very lucrative opportunity. How come you don't want to sign on with any labels?
I think that they would take the creative control completely out of my hands. I want to let people know what a record label is. A record label is a loan with horrible interest rates, where you don't even get to keep the property. You know, you don't get to keep your masters or your publishing. The majority of the time it's snatched out of your hands. You deliver a product of about 25 songs, and they pick 12 or 14 of them, and then they decide to create a marketing image around who you are. And I think that that's disingenuous. For me personally. For other people, they don't have a problem doing that, because they see it as an actor would, or they see it as a stage performer would. I was born a revolutionary, and that's what I'm going to be to the day that I die. I see the reality, and I see the sacrifice that's needed for it, and that's what I remind people about. And that's why I go to the places that I've gone to. That's why I'm in North Africa. That's why I go to Colombia. You know what I mean? That's why I've been to Afghanistan. That's why I go to these places, and I set up foundations to try and help these people that are victims of an occupation. Not because I share or pledge allegiance to one ideology over another. It's specifically because I don't want my politics controlled by somebody else. And also, to be quite honest, I'm making a lot more money independently than I would getting 13 cents a record.
What's next for your music?
I'm working on a new album called The Middle Passage. And I'm also working on a documentary called Urban Warfare, which details the rise of how I actually made it independently, what sacrifices I had to personally make, my travels around the world. I recently used the proceeds of the Third World album, the last one I did, to build an orphanage and a school in Kabul, and I went there myself to actually set it up, which is where I encountered all of these experiences. I, as a human being, have certain limitations on what I can do, but I think that I dedicate all that I have to revolutionary music and to the study of overturning an unjust system in the search for something better.
Immortal Technique, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me here. Do svidaniya.
One of the most disturbing stories we've uncovered involves the Americans' treatment of prisoners after they had been exposed in the Abu Ghraib scandal.
Good evening. The creeping nightmare of America's involvement in Iraq took a new and darker turn today with claims of torture by U.S. forces. An American television network...
Following international outrage, changes were promised by the US Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld.
It's my obligation to evaluate what happened, to make sure that those who have committed wrongdoing are brought to justice, and to make changes as needed to see that it doesn't happen again.
But we've unearthed 300 allegations of abuse meted out by American forces on Iraqi prisoners after Abu Ghraib.
Detainee reports that he was abused during his capture. Detainee is missing his right eye and has scars on his right forearm.
Detainee alleged that American forces, 1, punched him and hit him with weapons, 2, threw urine on him, and 3, applied electric shocks to his body.
2 Marines allegedly videotaped themselves, holding a knife to a detainee's throat and an M9 to the detainee's head.
Over a 6-year period, the data records the imprisonment of 180,000 Iraqis. That's 1 in 50 of the adult male population.
A lot of innocent people, large numbers of innocent people, were being hoovered up in these military operations and then sent into a prison system that clearly couldn't cope with them. That is exacerbating the problems the Americans had on the ground in Iraq, alienating the population, making them seem at best like an indiscriminate deployer of force and incarceration of innocent people.
One of the main reasons given by political leaders to justify the invasion of Iraq was to put an end to the oppression and appalling human rights abuses of Saddam Hussein's regime. They would offer the Iraqi people protection.
We will tear down the apparatus of terror, and we will help you to build a new Iraq that is prosperous and free. In a free Iraq, there will be no more torture chambers. The tyrant will soon be gone. The day of your liberation is near.
But this was another hollow promise. We've also detected more than 1,300 individual cases of the torture and abuse of Iraqi prisoners by Iraqis in their police stations and army bases, witnessed or reported on by coalition troops.
Subjected to torture by members of the Iraqi army. He was suspended from the ceiling. The use of electric drills to bore holes in his legs.
Tortured him by pouring chemicals on his hands, cut his fingers off, and hit him when coalition forces visited.
I think, if anything, this is the most chilling, horrific and damning evidence in the material. I think it's fair to say that this material indicates that the Iraqi security services, the Iraqi police especially, are using torture indiscriminately. This is incredibly damning.
Detainee, jabbed with a screwdriver, struck the cables and hoses in the arms, back and legs, electrocuted, sodomized with a hose.
But the best guarantee of our security is that people everywhere in the world are allowed to live their lives in decency and freedom, that the knock on the door is not the knock on the door of the secret police, and that in the end, that freedom is what they want in Iraq, what people want everywhere, and what we should be giving to them.
During the Saddam time, the knock on the door was from the security services. But after the occupation, the torture is done by police and security services, which is the state torture, and militias by different groups, by gangs. And nobody knows who is doing it outside the state. But the torture is widespread.
With torture now being endemic in Iraq, this completely undermines any justification for the invasion and any morality for the occupation and the aftermath of the invasion.
We've also identified 2 similar military orders, issued in 2005, which instructed US soldiers on how to respond to Iraqi-on-Iraqi abuse of prisoners. Fragmentary Order 039 stated that
Reports of Iraqi on Iraqi abuse be reported through operational channels. Provided the initial report confirms U.S. forces were not involved in the detainee abuse, no further investigation will be conducted unless directed by higher headquarters.
And the logs also reveal that the Americans handed over suspects to the Iraqi security services, knowing that torture was endemic. Almost on a daily basis, US soldiers filed reports of abuse and torture by Iraqis on Iraqis.
One detainee was diagnosed with a possible closed head injury, another with a possible jaw fracture, and the third with a possible spinal injury.
Iraqi police and Iraqi army shot and killed a local national. 3 Marines discovered the local national after they heard the 2 shots fired.
Iraqi police beat them. Died as a result of the abuse.
All these reports were marked.
As coalition forces were not involved in the alleged abuse, no further investigation is necessary.
In total, we found 21 ending with that phrase. In some cases, there were investigations into torture, but we don't know what action, if any, was taken against the Iraqi perpetrators.
The US forces infamously dismantled the Iraqi army, rebuilt it and retrained it. They constantly, from 2003 through to 2009-10, retrained, had advisors amongst the Iraqi police. And yet they didn't systematically, regularly intervene to stop what they knew was happening.
Good afternoon, folks. Last week,
during a press conference, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Peter Pace, and the then US Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld seemed at odds over what orders existed if US troops were aware of torture.
It is absolutely the responsibility of every U.S. service member, if they see inhumane treatment being conducted, to intervene to stop it.
I don't think you mean they have an obligation to physically stop it. It's to report it.
If they are physically present when inhumane treatment is taking place, or they have an obligation to try to stop it.
They really did not try hard enough to stop these infringements of human rights because they didn't care. And they wanted to let Iraqis kill each other, you know. And the thing, you know, the more Iraqis were killed by Iraqis than they were killed by Americans or anybody else, you know.
Individual cases are reported, the evidence is collected, but there still seems to be a culture of Iraqi impunity to use torture because, as far as we can tell, those people repeatedly using torture are not repeatedly prosecuted.
The Americans made public claims that they investigated allegations of torture in some of Iraq's prisons on 7 separate occasions between late November 2005 and March 2006.
But the people being held at those facilities were being properly taken care of. They were being fed, they had water, they were taken care of. So no abuse, no evidence of torture in those facilities.
But the data shows that during the same time period, the army recorded 76 separate allegations of abuse of Iraqis by the Iraqi security services in other places and reported them up their chain of command.
I don't think they turned completely a blind eye, but I don't think they made really strenuous efforts to stop it. Either because they did not want to interfere and also because they didn't want to get involved.
One of the ways that the US wanted to hand control back to the Iraqi people was to establish and train new Iraqi security forces. But these were easily infiltrated by sectarian militias with their own motives.
مسميات مكافحة الإرهاب، مسميات الشرطة الوطنية، مسميات المغاوير، عدة مسميات. كلن تغني على ليلى، كلن تتبع حزب معين لها. ولهذا أصبحت هناك خرق كبير لحقوق الإنسان، لأنه هناك تصفية حسابات، هناك عملية انتقام من الأشخاص اللي أتوا من الخارج في سبيل الانتقام.
In or out of police uniform, the sectarian militia death squads of the new Iraq were responsible for bloodshed on an unprecedented scale. The data shows that the Americans were aware of the horrific level of the violence. Over 32,500 civilians were murdered. The vast majority, found by coalition patrols, were unidentified corpses, dumped, often in the river Tigris. More than 10,000 were found shot in the head. Nearly 450 were decapitated. Over 160 were children. A senior Iraqi army officer who wanted to remain anonymous witnessed the horror.
ولذلك تم قتل الناس على هوية، هذا سني وذاك شيعي، قتلهم على الاسم، إذا هذا عثمان سني يقتل وإذا هذا علي شيعي يقتل.
In 2006-2007 you had bodies dropped at up to 100, 150 a day, with drills, bodies floating in the river with terrible signs of torture and killings. And they were done by militias or policemen that affiliated with militias.
Floating in the Tigris, burned with chemicals, body did not have head or hands.
12-year-old male, cinder block smashed into his face and tied to his head.
The child was about 6 years old. Several small holes originally thought to be gunshot wounds were holes caused by a drill.
While the numbers of bodies can be counted, there are no reliable figures for the numbers of Iraqis who have simply disappeared. In the Baghdad morgue, there's a missing room. Families whose relatives are missing, presumed dead, come here to try and recognize a body.
صح ولا لا؟ قتلتوا الاهل، قتلتوا ابويا انقتل، كلهم يعني ما بقوا.
The photographs of 20,000 corpses are kept on file to help people like Athraha Mohammed. She's trying to find the body of her husband, who disappeared 2 years ago.
ابوهم هسه انت قاعد تشوف الجثث محروقه، حتى ما نقدر نتعرف عليها، صح ولا لا؟ ايش نبيك ما بين هذول هو، بس ما نعرفه، شفت التعذيب اللي مسوي بيهم والحارقيهم حرق. زين شلون نعرف؟ ما نعرف الشكل.
Athra Mohammed is one of Iraq's 1 million widows.
وسوى بينا هيك من صغير كبير، وهذول حوابتهم، حوابة الاطفال، حوابة الارامل، حوابة الشباب الحلوه اللي راحت.
There is no official agency to help people in their desperate search. But given that the US military knew the date, time and location of thousands of deaths, maybe the database could provide some answers and help families discover what happened to their missing relatives.
For the record, I love the troops. I respect fully the honor that they have given me by serving my country. For they went to war thinking that they were going for the right cause. Now, in lieu and in light of all the aftermath, and knowing that they're growing opium in Afghanistan, knowing what's happened in Iraq, and all the children murdered, and the use of depleted uranium, and that's going to hurt our troops more than it hurt their people, and it's devastated their people, so consider the aftermath to our troops. In lieu of all of that, we need to end these wars right now, because these wars, if they were fought to be won, would have been won in 2004. It would have been less than a year of fighting. Okay? These wars are not meant to win. The same weapons manufacturers are arming both sides just as they do in every war. These wars are meant to destroy both civilizations. They are meant to destroy the United States military so that it cannot fight the New World Order when they go to take it over. And they are meant to destroy the Muslim people because they are uncontrollable. And they've always been uncontrollable. They would not join the New World Order, even if the New World Order offered them all the gold in the world. They could offer them everything, and the Muslim people would just want their land and their home and to be in their culture. They won't sacrifice that. And in a sense, they're strong, admirable people for that. And the fact that we disdain them in this country is a disgrace. We should admire them. They're standing up for their beliefs, even though they're vastly outnumbered and vastly outpowered. And they're being murdered and slaughtered. And there's still fucking thousands daily that will stand up and fight because they're fighting for their freedom and their homeland. You don't understand. These men aren't terrorists. The terrorists are created by the CIA. Of course there's people fighting us there. They think we are invading their homeland. That's what they think. They think that we're there murdering their children, stealing their oil, all of their land, destroying it. What would you do if you thought that people were here in this country raping your women, murdering your children, torturing you, calling you terrorists? How backwards is that? We're there blowing shit up and they're terrorists. Like, where are we? Where is this country's morality? People that in all right should be our allies against the New World Order. People that we should take a page out of their book and stand up for our beliefs and stand up for our rights. You people want to call yourselves Christians. Where are the good Christians that would stop the satanic New World Order, who openly puts satanic symbols all over your TV, all over your music? They openly worship the devil. They write in their own writings. They say horrible things that I'm not even going to mention right now because I've covered in other movies. They do horrible things. And you people just turn your head. And when people like me say something, or the horrible atrocities that they commit in the name of their supposed God, you people just call me crazy. But you're the religious ones. I'm not even religious. And I somehow am more religious than you, and am more willing to stand up against this than you, when your book even tells you to stand up against it. I've read your Bible, and it definitely, in the book of Revelations, does not tell you to sit here and wait. It tells you to speak out against this. It tells you to fight this, not to accept this. If you accept this, you've sold it, you've lost it, you've given it up. If your Bible's real and you people accept this, you're going to the wrong place. I don't think you quite understand this. You are not supposed to sit here and watch the human race be destroyed. You're not supposed to sit here and watch them be raped and children tortured. You're not supposed to do it. That's not what good people do. And I guarantee you, if there's a God, he is disgraced by you. He's appalled by what we've allowed to happen, not only in this country, but just on this planet in general. He is appalled, and I'm appalled. It's disgusting.
All your armies, all your fighters, all your tanks, and all your soldiers against the boy, holding a stone, standing there, all alone. In his eyes, I see the sun. In his smile, I see the moon. And I only wonder, who is weak and who is strong, who is right and who is wrong. And I only wish that the truth has a tongue.